faceoff. Shoots it, deflected, right in. Pietrangelo save, rebound. Stastny stopped by Pietrangelo. I don't believe that save. Neither does Peter Stastny. He can't believe the save that Pietrangelo just made on him as Frankie Sparkly. Now that maneuver there to stop and rob Peter Stastny. He should get 5 to 10 for that.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of Tendy Talk. I am your host Joe, better known as Washed Up Goalie on social media. This week I'm excited to welcome Goalie Guild founder and Colorado Avalanche emergency backup goaltender Justin Goldman to the show. But before I talk to Justin, let's take a short break. I want to thank my guest today, Justin, from the Goalie Guild and Lift the Mask. Justin, thanks for joining me. I've been following you for quite some time, and I've got the Lift the Mask sticker on my bucket, and so thanks for joining.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Love the hat, by the way. Vintage Goalie.
Yep.
Love the guy and love his brand. And I have my vintage goalie hat, right? Yep. I don't know. You guys see it right
there. It is.
So there's my snapback from Vintage Goalie, and I've got one T-shirt from the guy, and it's like shredded, right? Like I've worn it so many times. But yeah, man, happy to be on, and obviously thank you for supporting Lift the Mask with the sticker. It's really cool to see that you're doing this podcast, and I'm happy to be on.
Yeah, there's been some great hockey podcasts out there, and even some goalie related ones. In Goal is the obvious one, but Mike McKenna had his 6 degrees there for a while, and it just felt like, there's an opportunity for goalies to just talk to each other and not just tell hockey stories, but a little bit more of how they got into it, and also what do they do outside of hockey to find that balance, because as you've been a huge advocate, mental health, especially in goalies, is a huge thing that we need to talk about more. So sometimes that stuff we do outside of hockey is what grounds us. But I think a lot of us learned the past few months how much we need hockey. I remember seeing your LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, your Instagram post with your first skate. It wasn't that long ago. And I had the same feeling you did. You knew you needed it, but you didn't realize how much you needed it.
Yeah, it's crazy. My first time, really first 2 times back on the ice, and my last beer league game was middle of March. So I think it was like March 10th. And it was a really exciting game. I mean, it was our quarterfinal playoff game. We won. So we were, pumped up to know we were heading to the semifinals. And then boom, it's like, that's it. You don't get a chance to see your buddies and say, hey, by the way, I'll see you in 6 months. Like it's just done. Right. So you automatically miss, the playoff atmosphere of beer league hockey, which is always fun. You miss seeing the guys on the team. You miss being at the rink. And then, we've all gone through stretches where we haven't been able to play, whether it's injury or work or life or whatever, but knowing that nobody is playing, and like, if you do go out and try and play, you're compromising your health and the health of others around you. Like, it brings a completely different dynamic to missing the sport that you love. And I think when I finally got on the ice, I did one like semi-private session at a training facility called Mountain High Hockey. And that was in July. But my first real time back on a full sheet of ice, again, like you said, it was just a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know how to explain the feeling, but it felt like my brain and my whole being just got like replenished and rejuvenated. Like I was standing under a waterfall and just being rejuvenated, mind, body, and spirit. That's what it felt like. And the sweat that I got on, and just the sensations of feeling my edges in the ice, and reacting to pucks and tracking pucks, it felt amazing. Like there's a difference between like feeling rust, right? Like when you feel a little off and you're like maybe not reacting cleanly, or like, you give up a couple of softies, and then there's that feeling of like, this feels so new again. It's amazing. Like you really get the sensation of being a goaltender, and it's like playing the position for the first time all over again. That's kind of like what I felt. And it was one of the most beneficial things for my mental health that I've felt in a really long time. Like, it's great to have the conversations and do the Lift the Mask stuff, and you feel the benefits from that, from having the conversations, talking to guys like yourself. but I don't think I've really ever experienced something quite, for lack of better terms, spiritual in terms of getting back on the ice and feeling the game and feeling the puck again. It was really like you said, like just something that was desperately needed, and just a really cool experience.
Yeah, it was funny. I remember walking into the rink the first time and just that deep breath of, breathing in that ice air. It was like it filled you up. And then I think I was talking to Chip from Totally Offsides, and she put it a good way of, it was almost like being on some kind of 3-day caffeine high without having the coffee, the coffee afterwards. It just, I remember waking up the next morning. I was like, God, that felt good, um, but yeah, it was definitely needed. And, I typically take the summers off because my team, most of the guys have cabins here in Minnesota, and,
Nice.
so they take advantage of our nice few weeks of weather. So, but I'll fill in every now and then. So, some summers I won't skate at all, but there's that thought of, well, somebody could call me, but there wasn't that opportunity. And then all of a sudden I got a message from Cass from the For the Love of Puck project. And he said, hey, I've got ice in Hudson, Wisconsin, which is about 40 minutes from me. Cause their rinks are open. Are you in? And I said, absolutely. There was
100%.
no second thought. And, we all walked in with the same background of none of us had skated yet. So there was no worry of being rusty or looking like a fool because we were all in the same boat.
Right.
Nobody had skated. And, after that skate, we were just smiling in the locker room. It was just, it was like a kid after their first skate of the season. You're like, I can't help but smile because I feel good, and most of the folks that were in that locker room, I knew some of them, but not all of them, but it didn't matter. We just all had the same feeling, and it was good to be around them.
Yeah. That's a really cool point you make about just how everyone was kind of on the same page, and that chemistry you kind of feel from knowing that, like, it doesn't matter how bad you look out there. It's just the sheer joy of playing. And that reminds me of just how important it is to have fun when you're playing. Like, if you can always bring back those sensations and those memories of when you were just a kid skating around, you didn't have any ego, you didn't care about what you looked like, or if all your gear matched, or if you had the fanciest crap on. It was just going out and having that love for the game. And I still reflect on just getting back on the ice here a few times, and how much the auditory and the olfactory senses play into memory. It's not just visual, it's not just, verbal. It's like the way the rink smells. Like you say, you take that deep breath and it just, again, rejuvenates you, and reminds you of, what it was like playing as a kid. And I think that's like really important for a lot of goalies to remember, beer leaguers or, competitive junior goalies. It's like, there's nothing wrong with taking some time away. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not like you're going to forget how to, you need to. It's like, you're not going to forget how to skate. You're not going to forget how to, track pucks. Like, those things are so ingrained in our muscle memory and in our minds. Like, it's amazing how fast it actually comes back. And of course, everyone's different. Some guys, take a little bit longer to get comfortable again, and others can just kind of jump out there and they feel fine. But it really is amazing how the body and the mind works, and it all comes back to you, even though you feel like, holy crap, I haven't skated in 3 or 4 months. Like, do I even remember how to do things? And it's like, no, it's like, it's ingrained, it's in your DNA almost. And you don't forget. So, like, a lot of goalies worry about, taking that time off and what it's going to, how it's going to impact their long-term development or their short-term success. And it's like, you know what, if you just don't worry about those things and you just go out and play and be free and enjoy it and really take in those different senses that come with being a goalie, like, it's amazing how fast it comes back. And you don't really get a lot of time to realize that, because hockey's become basically a year-round sport. So I think even though it's been rough for a lot of us, there's always a silver lining to it. And that's kind of been the silver lining for me, is that, like, wow, this is a really good way to remember that, like, if I miss time due to an injury or for whatever reason, it's okay. I'll come back and I'll still be, a decent goalie.
Yep.
I'll still have my skill set there.
I'll still stop 2 out of 10.
There you go. Yeah.
It was funny as you were talking about, it's okay to step away and, that first skate back, how you feel. And my first skate back, I had no expectations. I was expecting to play terrible. And because of that, it was almost like I wasn't thinking on the ice. I was just reacting, and I wound up playing a lot better because of it. Where the next few skates after, I just kind of changed my approach a little bit. Instead of focusing too much on the upcoming skate, it was, no, let's just take it for what it is. Go out there, have fun. And I've played well because of that. Hopefully that transfers over into the fall season, but
Right.
pickup skates, it seemed to work out well. And, the other piece he touched on is, you had your beer league game, and then all of a sudden it was just boom. And I think a lot of us for the longest time took for granted that we always knew when the next skate was. And then all of a sudden we realized that could be taken away really quickly. And with the fall season coming up, I know myself, I'm looking at going, okay, we're going to have a schedule, but are we going to be able to get through it? Because the state, the rink, the league, somebody could shut it down with the snap of a finger, just like it happened last time. I remember my last game was the same night the NHL played their last game. I was skating it. It was week 2 of our season that I was in. And we were starting to see the reports that the NBA was shutting down before our game. We're like, this is something. And there was a bar connected to the rink. So after the game, we went over there and we all had a drink and kind of had the realization, let's enjoy a little more time after the game, because we might not see each other next week.
Yeah, I think you bring up 2 really good points, and like, it's amazing how much we get in our own way.
Yep.
As goalies. And I experienced the same thing. Like, there is such a thing as trying too hard. And I feel like for most of my 20s, I felt like the harder I worked, the more it would help me get better. And then I feel like in my 30s, I'm 38. I feel like in my 30s, it's like the less I try, the more I accomplish. And I think I think that's why you see goalies in their 30s still have plenty of success at all levels, because you just realize how easy it is to just let the game come to you as opposed to forcing it. And I use that analogy of like the Chinese finger trap, right? Like, when you try and force your fingers apart, you're just making it harder on yourself. But if you just relax and let things happen, it's like, okay. So I like to use that analogy with goalies, because it's so true. Like, you get in your own way a lot of the times. You create the noise in your mind that leads to anxiety and worrying and overthinking things. And, it is I think back to like some of my better playoff runs the past few years in beer league. And it's like, it's not even a notion that you're going to struggle with the anxiety, because you've just enjoyed the ride. And you realize that, like, hey, like you said, again, something that I think happens in your mid to late 30s or even older, you don't know how much longer you've got to enjoy the game. So you stop worrying about the short-term results, and you stop being results driven, and you just enjoy the process, and then you end up playing better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Before I get to ask these questions, I've done my homework. I've listened to some of the other podcasts you've been on, but I wanted to ask you, how did you get into hockey in the first place?
Yeah. It's a fun story to tell because it's so non-traditional, right? And that is a big part of who I am, is the fact that despite not having the playing experience and things like that, I've still been able to find a way to have a career in pro hockey. And so, hockey didn't even exist. It wasn't even something that was in my mind when I was growing up, because I grew up on a horse ranch in Texas, you know, in a very rural town called Parker, about an hour northeast Dallas. So again, I grew up, I didn't even know hockey existed. Like I didn't know the sport was even real. And then all of a sudden the Minnesota North Stars moved to Dallas, right? 1993. And I start to see the billboards around town, like a hockey team's coming. And I'm like, what is this? What is this noise? Right. And growing up in Texas, it's football and basketball. Like
Yep.
football is hockey in Minnesota. It's the culture. It is the way of life. That's what everyone talks about. That's what everyone aspires to be. And I was too small to be a goalie. I was this, skinny, lanky kid. And I played basketball growing up. And then, I took basketball so seriously that I started to get burned out on it, and I was looking for something new. I was looking for a new challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And hockey just fit the culture of kids like me that were maybe not interested in being football players, but wanted a physical, aggressive, different experience. And that's what hockey brought to, the Dallas metro area in the mid 90s.
And
And
you
the
had
other
that
thing
ranch toughness too that plays well in hockey.
yeah, you talk about like um, good old boys from Western Canada that grow up on the ranch and they have success, but guys like Braden Holtby, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was a little bit of me. I was very free spirited. I love animals. I love being outdoors. I'm a huge nature freak. And so that's what it was for me. It was just this new experience. And I love experiencing anything new. I'm always looking to uncover things that I haven't experienced, or going to different places, like my whole journey to Finland and Sweden. And so for me, hockey was just something new and fresh and exciting. And nobody was better than anyone else because we were all terrible because we had never skated before. And there was one ice rink in Dallas at the Galleria Mall, in kind of like North Dallas. And it was so hard to get skating lessons because there was only one rink. So it was mostly figure skaters, or they would have these public ice sessions, in a mall, and the skates were always rented out. And it was the most frustrating thing ever. So what my friends and I did, we just started playing street hockey.
Yep.
And that's how it started. It was, 3 or 4 solid years of street hockey, playing after school every single day. In Texas, it gets really hot in the summer, but even in the winter, street hockey, you can play year round. And I think from like the age of 11/12 until almost 16 years old, it was strictly just street hockey. And then every once in a while I would get a chance to go on an ice sheet, and learn how to ice skate. And then when I was a freshman in high school, so when I was 15 years old, that's when the Stars started the Junior Stars program.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was one of the first like goalies to be in that Junior Stars program. And that's where I learned how to ice skate. That's where I learned like some real basic fundamentals. I didn't have a goalie coach, but our head coach would show me some things. And so mostly it was just self-taught. But what I always tell everyone is the power of watching goalies on TV. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how it was for a lot of us growing up. It was just watching our favorite goalies and then just trying to go out and emulate that, on the street or the ice.
Yeah. I'm a year older than you, so we're kind of same generation. It's interesting you bring up street hockey because I feel like our generation played so much street hockey. Even those of us, I grew up in Chicago and we had a few more rinks up there than down in Dallas. But if you weren't on the ice, you were out in the street playing street hockey. And there's that scene from Wayne's World, car game off, and that game. But that was reality back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, some of my best memories were just getting home from school, literally taking off my uniform, grabbing my bag, grabbing my skates, going down the street. And we had this like local church where they had these huge parking lots that were empty every day except Sunday. So we took advantage of those empty parking lots, and it was the same thing. Sometimes we'd play on the street at one buddy's house, then you'd rollerblade for a couple of miles and you go to your other buddy and pick him up. And pick up his or her, her buddy. And then all of a sudden you've got enough to play, some 3-on-3 or 5-on-5, tennis courts or churches. And so literally you mapped your neighborhood by where the best areas to play street hockey were. Like, oh, we got to stay away from this street. There's too many cracks in the pavement, like, oh, this is really smooth surface over here. Oh, and they've got these backboards on these tennis courts. That's perfect. So it was really awesome to kind of like reflecting on it now, being a part of that first wave of youth hockey in Dallas. And there were a couple of guys that, I played against in high school that went on to play minor leagues and stuff like that. And I thought that was always really cool too. But I always knew, okay, I'm a kid from Texas. I want to be a goalie. I want hockey to be in my life forever. but I'm pretty realistic that it's not going to be as a player. Like, of course I strive to want to be the best goalie I could be, but
Right.
I was also very realistic, and I was also really passionate about my education. Like, I went to, Catholic Catholic school. I went to a college preparatory, Jesuit high school. And I was just really fortunate. By the time I was a sophomore, our club hockey program was good enough to be a varsity sport. So that's really what helped me a lot in terms of like developing as an athlete and developing that passion for ice hockey. Was by the time I was already a sophomore in high school, I was playing, varsity high school hockey in Texas, albeit it was very grassroots and it wasn't like the most talented league. It was still really exciting to, again, be the first goalie on the very first hockey team at my high school.
You were a pioneer.
Kind of, and it was just cool to know that, like, now hockey is so huge in Dallas and high school hockey is really good. And there's some talent emerging out of Texas. It's really cool to think how much it's changed in 20 years. And now it's nowhere near Minnesota, obviously, but now you can actually drive around the town of Dallas and see, a bunch of rinks popping up and some youth associations, and the Junior Stars program is really strong. So yeah, that's kind of how it came into my life. And the Stars were good enough that first year to be competitive and make the playoffs. And I think that really helped, that the team was competitive right out of the gate. And they had some great personalities like Andy Mogan, Darcy Wakaluk, and, his black setup is why I fell in love with black gear. And then obviously we had Eddie Belfour. So it was really cool to see that kind of all emerge and to know that, I got to be a part of like that first wave of youth hockey in Texas.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you mentioned it a little bit, but you've been able to make your career out of hockey, and hearing that backstory, most people wouldn't expect you to be able to do that. Somebody coming from Minnesota or Canada, they could see that, but how have you been able to establish yourself in the hockey community? Because if you look around now, you have your yearly goalie summit that people come from all over the world for. You are considered, one of these people that people look up to for goaltending, whether it be for instruction or the Lift the Mass project. How have you been able to make that a career?
Yeah, I think for me, again, it really stems back to my passion for learning. And so taking my education really seriously and just being a person that loves to absorb information and learn from everyone and everything I possibly can. Like, I'm in a constant state of learning. And I think for me, part of it was definitely right place at the right time. So what really started my career in hockey was when I was a sophomore at Colorado State University. Out of nowhere, kind of like when the Minnesota North Stars came to Dallas, like out of nowhere, in right where I was going to school, the Colorado Eagles franchise, the minor league hockey team, came out of nowhere. Like, they just picked Northern Colorado as their place to dig in their roots and start competing in the old Central Hockey League. And as you know, they've evolved all the way up to, now the Avs main affiliate. They're an AHL franchise right there in Northern Colorado. So literally 10 minutes from where I was going to school and studying, technical journalism and broadcasting and creative writing, all of a sudden there's a minor league hockey program new to the area. So as soon as I heard this was happening, I was like, holy shit, like this is my chance, right? Like, this is my chance to be a junior reporter as a college student for a minor league hockey program. Like this, I have to make this happen. So I just went and banged on their door and talked to the media guy and was like, hey, I'm a journalism student. I'm a hockey goalie. Like, I'm basically like the third string goalie for CSU's club team. So I'm not really playing in games, but I practice with these guys. Like, I would love to, cover your team. I'll do anything I can to be involved. And they were amazing. They gave me the press credential. They were like, anything you need for school, or if you just want to, report and cover games and write some articles for us, like, we'd love that. And so I was very, very lucky to, again, as a, 19/20-year-old, already have that press credential and have the ability to sit in the press box and start, scouting goaltenders at a minor league level and go into the locker room and experience what it's like to have that anxiety of having to hold a recorder to one of your favorite goalies' face and be like, how did you feel about that crappy goal you gave up? So I was really fortunate, again, while I was still going to college, to have this opportunity to be like a minor league hockey reporter.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just remember how fun it was to sit there in the press box, and instead of really paying attention to what the skaters were doing, just dialed in on the goalies, just pages and pages of notes on observations that I would make about their style and their stance and their movements and their tendencies and their habits. And I've got notebooks full of them, stashed away from like 2 or 3 seasons worth of Central Hockey League play. And back then, this was in 2002 to 2005, there were no goalie specific analysts out there on social media, and social media wasn't even really a thing yet. This was before In Goal magazine started. This was before, obviously, the Goalie Guild was a thing.
Goalies World was still around then.
Goalies World was still around, and that was the only thing, and that really played a big influence. And like the hockey news, getting the the news, the hockey news every week, that was what fueled this passion for hockey journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where my career started, was just having the passion for wanting to share my thoughts and observations and reports on minor league goalies.
Mm-hmm.
And again, in Colorado, the hockey community is really small. So by the time I graduated in 2004, I had an opportunity to act as the editor-in-chief for a local hockey magazine called Colorado Hockey Insider. So it was like this monthly tabloid newspaper that was in every rink in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And all it did was just cover hockey in Colorado, whether it was the Avs or DU Pioneers or CC Air Force, all levels of hockey. And that included the Eagles.
Yeah, it was the Let's Play Hockey of Colorado.
Exactly. Let's Play Hockey of Colorado. So again, same thing. Great opportunity to become their editor-in-chief, and I would make like $500 a month. And I was definitely one of those poor, starving, recent graduates who didn't make a lot of money, but just had this passion for wanting to, build the hockey community and provide good insight. And that editor-in-chief job for this, monthly hockey magazine led to an opportunity to start covering the Avalanche. And so again, because hockey in Colorado in terms of like, broadcasting and journalism was really small,
mm-hmm.
I had that opportunity to start doing some like radio spots and get a press credential to cover the Avalanche. And so by the time the 2006 season rolled around, I was a member of the Pro Hockey Writers Association covering the Avalanche, and that was a huge step. And
mm-hmm.
so again, same thing. I would sit in the press box and just take a copious amount of notes on NHL goalies and their movements and everything you could possibly imagine. And so by then I had the ability to build like a real basic WordPress blog. And that's where the Goalie Guild started. And that was, I think, in 2008. So yeah, that's kind of, it's like one little step after one little step after one little step. I definitely had to go through that transition of realizing what I don't know and realizing that I'm always going to get some haters and some people that don't agree or want to know my playing experience or want to know what the heck I think I know about goaltending. But I didn't really care about all that because I was just so passionate about learning, right? And so I kind of go back to that concept of just continually being in that state of awareness where I want to just get better at my craft. I want to understand why goalies do the things they do. Why do they wear gear a certain way? Why do coaches make these decisions? And so that curiosity and that passion for wanting to learn is what continued to help me take these steps and refine my craft. And, it went from the Eagles to the Avalanche to, NHL.com to USA Hockey. All these steps are just because I'm always constantly learning. And I think everyone in the goalie community and in hockey in general just realized I had that passion, that I was just trying to, bring more awareness to the position and help fans understand why goalies do things. And so it stopped being more about like what I think I know or trying to promote myself. And it was more just about like what I'm doing to help grow the position and help other goalies. And so that's kind of, I think, what really helped me become a little bit more well recognized, and the social media stuff started to explode. And I've always kind of stayed true to, you know, that purpose of just giving back and wanting to help educate the community.
Yeah, and you mentioned when the Goalie Guild launched, I remember logging on to the site way back then because it was
Okay.
just more knowledge for a goalie. It's like, what am I going to find here? And you brought up a good point. You know, sometimes people will look at a coach and say, well, what about your playing background? You didn't play, you know, at this level or that level. And you see it across all sports. Some of the best in the sport are terrible coaches. Wayne Gretzky was not a very good coach. Ted Williams was a terrible hitting instructor. And it's the marginal player that has to observe and learn and really understand their position in whatever sport tend to be the better coaches, because they have to constantly find better ways. They have to look at what other people are doing. And it's because of that, you know, a guy like Ian Clark or Mitch Korn, who never played in the NHL, are some of the best in the game.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's crazy to me on how some people always think, you know, you need to have some high level playing experience. No, you need to have some experience, but it doesn't need to be at the highest levels to understand what's going on, because I know what I'm supposed to do. My body just won't let me do it.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
You know, especially these days as I'm 39, my mind's telling me to do what I could do when I was 21 in college, but my body's telling me no.
No, and I think it's like it is really cool to look at guys like Ian Clark and Mitch Korn, like you mentioned, and some of the others, and realize that it's not always what you know or how good you are. It's just how you treat people. You know, like Mitch Korn has this amazing ability. He's got like the Midas touch for goalies. How does he make every goalie he works with a little bit better? Is it just what he's doing on the ice? No, it's just his ability to create those relationships and find ways to motivate guys. And that's what I think really separates, you know, maybe your good coaches or your good goalies from your great ones. It's like their ability to communicate and drop the ego and realize that you can always learn something new from anyone, anywhere, any given time. It's all just how you observe it. And if you've always got, you know, blinders on, or you always think your way is the right way and there's no other way to do it, you just pigeonhole yourself and you miss out on 99% of the stuff that you could be learning that's out there. And so I think for me, just knowing that, okay, I'm just a kid from Texas, like I'm just here to learn and to help and get better and do good stuff. I always was very open to everyone and anyone telling me what they thought was right and, you know, what their observations are. And so I was constantly just taking in perspectives and observations. And I made it a point every single day, and I can say this with 100% guarantee, from the day I turned 20 to almost this very day, every day I'm reaching out to someone new, or someone that I respect, or someone just to ask them how they see things or what they think about X, Y, or Z, or whatever the case may be. So it's just that constant ability to always like have your ideas, have your thoughts, have your opinions, but also don't negate what anyone else thinks, because everyone sees things a little bit differently. And you start to understand what's reality and what's perception, and you start to get over your own inherent biases. And
it's that Brene Brown piece of the story I'm telling myself.
Exactly. And goaltending is mostly mental, so it's easy to get caught up in what you think you know is happening. But same thing, like when you watch the game from different angles and you watch the game from different perspectives, you see things so differently. Like from behind the net versus 200 feet up in the press box versus right along the glass, you know, versus your own perspective in the net. Like all those different perspectives help give you a better understanding of what reality actually is. And then the more observations you make and the more perspectives, you realize that reality is not quite what it seems. And that helps you, I think, eliminate that ego a little bit and just be more transparent and be more willing to listen to other people's advice or observations or perspectives.
It's interesting you say that, because there's been times where I've gone to hockey games with my dad, and, you know, he sees me following plays and he'll ask me, what are you seeing? What are you looking at? Because I'm looking at the game a completely different way. But you said something a little bit earlier that really stuck out to me, and it was, guys like Mitch Korn, they find ways to connect with the goalies on a different level. And I think that's important when you're coaching any position, any sport, whatever you do, is you can't treat every goalie the same. You can't line them up and say, this is how it's done, do it, follow. I've seen camps where that's what it is. This is how your stance should be. It was get to know your goalie, understand, how they play, and then work with them with that. When I was coaching at the high school level, I learned my goalies' personalities. And one of the goalies, I had put my arm around him and, coddle him a little bit. And then there was another goalie, I could just look at him from the bench and mouth the words, "What were you thinking?" And he's like, "Yep, I'm better now." It's getting to know them and how to connect with them. And like I said, some of them you could yell at, call them every name in the book, and they're like, "Yeah, I deserve that." And other ones, you got to treat them like a teddy bear.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to turn off.
Yeah. And I think goalie coaches have done a great job, as a whole, understanding that, because like you said, when I was growing up, it was just the factory line construct of developing goalies. And now I think we've entered this golden age, so to speak, where we really do consider the personality and the learning process more than just, okay, here's a physical skill set, let's mold them and shape them all to look the same and to be as polished as possible. And we always have these discussions about like how goalies in the 80s and 90s all looked different, right? You had your Hašiks, your Waz, your Brodeurs, your Van Beesbrooks, your Richters. They were all different. Potvin, all those guys. And now it's like we talk about how goalies all look kind of the same. And we've lost a lot of that unbridled reaction-based goaltending. And that's always a really interesting conversation, because I still think today goalies look really different. It's just kind of in a different bubble, so to speak.
Yep.
Because the game evolves and the position evolves and the gear evolves. So the gear looks a little bit more streamlined and things like that. And it's always really interesting. And I think that's why I've become so passionate about learning design, and the educational component of goaltending, because again, everyone plays differently. You have to coach everyone differently. And that's because everyone learns differently. And so understanding how your goalie is motivated to learn and improve intrinsically and extrinsically, I think that's what makes some of these goalie coaches so damn good. And like, we're seeing it right now, like what Thatcher Demko and Carter Hart and even Michael Hutchison and Pavel Francouz, like what these goalies are able to do to get themselves ready to play in these like massive games and come out so composed and just do their thing is remarkable to me, in terms of like the coaching and just the mental fortitude of the athletes themselves. So it's amazing to see. And I think it's just such a cool time to be a goalie, because you can be yourself, but you can still have a lot of success, even if you have some areas that don't look that polished or aren't that strong. Like, you can still find ways to adapt and have success in these really tough situations. And it's really awesome to see.
Now, you mentioned something about the goaltenders of the 80s and 90s just having this different style. Everybody, you didn't have to see the jersey or the helmet to know it was Eddie Belfour or Felix Potvin or Mike Richter. All these guys, they had their own unique style. And when you hear a lot of them talk, they almost all say they never had a goalie coach until they got to the NHL. And now we're seeing it, and they're talking about it on In Goal quite a bit lately, the Russian goalies. They have their own unique styles, and we're starting to learn they're not getting formal goalie training till maybe the bantam age, junior high school. And that's intentional, because they want these kids to just learn to react before they learn, oh, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And I think that's why we're seeing more Russian goalies in the NHL now than we have in the previous. There's 3 of them left in the playoffs right now. Do you think there's something to that maybe we're starting to teach our goalies a little too young?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what's so fascinating about goalie development as a whole is those environmental and cultural
Mhm.
impacts. Obviously, my time spent in Finland and Sweden really opened my eyes to the fact that there are many different ways to create an NHL goalie.
Yeah.
And what Russia's doing is so exciting is because it proves that you don't need all of the structure in the world. You just need it at the right places at the right time. And the right time is when their brains have formed enough to become more self-aware, to
Hmm.
realize what they do need and what they necessarily don't need. And we understand now that there's when you look at the goaltending blueprint, the things that you constantly always need are just that adaptability, the unbridled athleticism that we talked about earlier,
Yep.
and just that sheer competitive drive to stop every puck no matter what it takes or how you do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you see in those Russian goalies. They are fierce. They have crazy work ethic off the ice with their training, like, their physical training, and they have a high competitive drive to want to stop every puck. You see that in Vasilevsky, Sorokin, Shesterkin, all these young, awesome Russian goalies.
Yeah.
And I think that helps. I hope that helps North America realize that, like, you know what? You don't need all of the structure in the world when you're 8, 9, 10 years old, because your
Right.
body is changing so much. Your mind is changing, and you need to go through that self-learning at those ages to
Hmm.
realize, like, how your body moves in specific ways. Does the VH actually work for me? Or do I feel a little janky in it and I'm more of an RVH guy, or vice versa?
Yep.
No goalie coach is going to tell you that. You have to feel it and experience it for yourself
Yep.
through trial and error, through failure, through perseverance, and again, just that self motivation to want to get better every single day. So I hope that as goalie coaches and as a goalie coaching culture in North America, we are still there for our athletes at the ages of 6 to 12, but we're there for social emotional support, not to teach you the technical nitty gritty, finer details that you can easily still integrate into your game when you're
Hmm.
15 or 16. So I think it's not just the sense that, like, oh, we shouldn't have goalie coaches until they're 12. It's that goalie coaches should just have more of a holistic approach at those younger ages to support their mental game, to support their growth as human beings
Hmm.
first. And then when they get older and they're more self-aware and their body, they're going through that growth spurt, 13, 14, 15 years old, that's when you can start to become more detail oriented and focus on, the tactical approach and, breaking down certain strategies and game plans. But before then, it's like, just be there to support your goalie, make sure that he or she has that, post to lean on,
Yep.
so that they continue to want to have that passion for getting better. And so that's kind of how I observe, or some of my opinions on, like, goalie coaching culture in North America. And you've seen the European cultures and the European countries have success just leaving goalies alone for a little while and then really dialing them in when they're at that junior level age. So
USA Hockey has their, what are they terming it? 50 and 30 campaign for
51
goalies.
and 30.
51. Do you see them following this thought process of, let's let the young goalies develop a little bit on their own, be there for them, but develop? Or are you seeing more of that factory coaching at the younger levels?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see both. And like, you know, the great thing about these European countries is that they're small enough compared to the US to where the structure can be really streamlined and everyone can be on the same page easily.
Hmm.
And they really do have that club level system that allows, goalie coaches at the professional level to still kind of integrate that culture all
Right.
the way down to the grassroots levels where those clubs are starting. North America is very different because it's more of a business oriented culture where
And
you
it's
have your,
regional.
it's regional, it's privatized, it's very much brand specific, where a goalie coach can go out, create his or her own brand, have her own style of coaching. They get their kids, they teach their kids in their area, and then that's it. Now, what's great about what USA Hockey is doing is that they are creating a program that thrives in both worlds, where coaches can still have their privatized culture and, they have to make a living, which is totally understandable, but still kind of spiral back and reinforce some of the main principles of goaltending that we do want to see at a national level, which is like, if a goalie's 8 years old, like, focus on fun, the fundamentals, FUN, right?
Yep.
And then you have that age specific long-term athletic development model. And in USA, it's called the ADM, right? The American Development Model, that has been really successful for a lot of players and skaters for the last 10 years. Now, for goalies, it's a different story because we know goalies are on a different development curve.
Yep.
And so I think the 51 and 30 is very ambitious, but I think that's totally okay because we're starting to develop a culture of, goaltending success. And you look at Thatcher Demko, right? Like, he went through the program. His last year at the NTDP was the first year I was involved with USA Hockey. And that's when I moved to Minnesota. I was living up there in Burnsville for a couple of years, was part of that NTDP. And so, I think it's just understanding that it's really hard to change the culture of goalie development across this country because it's such a big country. Yep. And there are so many different regions where hockey's really strong. And maybe in Vegas, it's like very grassroots, like where it was in Texas 20 years ago. So it's really hard to get everyone on the same page in terms of a national goalie development program in the US compared to, Finland, Sweden, and some of these European countries. But it does seem like they're starting to make progress in getting, goalie coaches and programs to understand that, like, you're more of an observer at those really young ages. And then as the goalies work their way up the ranks, then you start to increase the level of technical coaching. So I think we're starting to make progress. Obviously, it takes a lot of time and there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm definitely starting to see that culture shift a little bit. And that's a really good thing.
Yeah. Now, one question I had for you, you mentioned it earlier with kids, if they're playing hockey year round, they're going to get burnt out at some point. You mentioned it with basketball. That's what kind of drove you to hockey. You got burnt out. With hockey kind of be your day job as well, do you ever get burnt out with the sport where you're like, you know what, I need to turn the TV off, I need to go away from the rink? Do you experience burnout?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah. I mean, I was so focused on social media when I was writing for NHL.com. And I wrote for NHL.com from 2011 until 2014. And when I stopped, it was because I was burned out on the day-to-day, wins and losses and save counts and save percentage and ranking goalies for fantasy league every week, every day for 4 years. I became passionate about other things. That's when I started to travel overseas, was after my NHL.com stint, because I knew there was so much more I wanted to learn beyond just what's happening in the NHL bubble. Obviously I learned a lot and it was great to be able to cover NHL goalies, but it was just too much. And I didn't want to pigeonhole my career or myself into a guy that just covered NHL goalies. And the only value I bring to the hockey community is what I know about NHL goalies. Like, there's more out there, like, I want to have a positive impact on the culture. And so in order to do that, one, I have to, make the commitment to travel to other countries to see how other countries are doing it well. And that's a time commitment. That's a financial commitment. And that's stepping away from what many would consider a dream job, writing for NHL.com, and realizing that there's still more steps in this journey. And that's always been something that's really helped me stay away from getting burned out, is the fact that I have so many interests in so many different things. And so when it comes to me maintaining balance, like, I love metal music, like, before I would maybe like not really talk about it on social media because it's not a popular music style. But to this day, I still tweet about how nothing goes together better than metal and hockey.
There's a lot of goalies that are big into heavy metal. The more you talk to, it's funny how many of them are metalheads. And Mike McKenna is an obvious one that comes to mind because he's always talking about it.
It's really awesome. And I mean, I've been a metalhead for 20 years and going to shows every year and seeing my favorite bands roll through and I'm a huge fan of Scandinavian metal. So the Finnish and Swedish bands, like that's why I had this passion for Scandinavian goalie culture, because just the culture and the history in general. Like I'm a huge Vikings buff. So I'm really into ancient cultures and Scandinavian culture. And if you look at my bookshelf, it's 90% like Viking history and, you know, stuff on creativity. It's not even hockey related.
And
So
you're not
yeah,
talking Minnesota Vikings. You're talking the actual Vikings.
talking the actual real Nordic
Yeah.
Vikings, everything from, you know,
Vikings that won.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think it's, you have to have it. Um, the, the other thing too is that you can learn from everything. And there are things I learn about Viking culture that help me with goalie development.
Mm-hmm.
It's as crazy as it sounds. There are stories about, you know, famous Viking warriors that have persevered through different battles and have, you know, put tribes on their shoulders and conquered lands and things like that. And you're like, how the hell does Viking culture help you understand goalies better? But it's about the stories of people that persevere and overcome incredible odds to accomplish amazing things and have that warrior mentality. And like, that is a goaltender in a nutshell. You are a warrior. You have to have that warrior mentality. You have to be willing to battle for pucks. You have to be willing to push through all types of physical adversity to claim what's yours, which is that crease. You know what I mean? So there are connections.
Yep.
You just have to be willing to look for them.
Yeah.
And we're always in that goalie mindset. Like if I'm watching a documentary on Viking history, I immerse myself in it, but in the back of my mind, I'm always tying everything to my experience as a goalie. And there are a lot of connections there. I think that's why you see a lot of metalheads that are hockey goalies, because it's that like battle mentality. I'm going to go into war and I'm fighting alongside my brothers to, you know, win a battle and win a championship. And so, that is kind of the beauty of, you know, having different passions, is that it's not like you stop being a goalie. You just make different connections in different ways, and you find ways to relate, you know, these passions and bring it all together into, you know, that human experience. So, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in all kinds of native ancient history stuff, and I've got my trinkets and my drinking horn and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, that's it's fun to be able to kind of blend them together and have them coexist, and know that, you know, if I'm burnt out on hockey, I can just go immerse myself in a Vikings book or something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, and I think that leads into, you know, the next area I want the conversation to go to is in 2014, you launched the Lift the Mask initiative. And it's great because I love the idea of other goalies helping each other, because we understand the anxiety, the pressures that other goalies go through, but sometimes we can't always help each other. So there's even financial support for the goalies that need to go get professional help. Tell me a little bit about why you chose to start Lift the Mask and where you see it going in the future. Because it seems like it's, at least to an outsider like me, it's been a huge success, and I can only imagine that there's even greater plans for it.
Yeah. So, you know, I started Lift the Mask because, like a lot of things, I saw there was a lack of resources that were goalie specific. So same thing with the Goalie Guild. It's like, oh, there's no goalie blogs out there. Well, let's start a goalie blog. Obviously there should be one. Like there's a lot of goalies out. So it's the same thing. It's like I started doing research on mental health initiatives in hockey, and it was the Bell Let's Talk initiative that I discovered and saw. And I didn't know necessarily, you know, a couple of years ago when I started Lift the Mask, that it was just mostly a Canadian thing. And so then I started to look like, wow, I wonder if there's any like hockey specific mental health initiatives in the States. And I didn't find any.
Right.
And I was like, well, if there's no hockey specific initiatives for mental health in the US, then there's obviously not a goalie one. And there definitely should be, because, you know, as a mentor and someone who's written some books on goaltending, like I was starting to hear from a lot of parents that were like, man, my kid's been a goalie for 6 years. He or she has never shown any signs of, you know, mental health problems. And now all of a sudden they're dealing with like crippling anxiety or suicidal ideations or OCD tendencies. Like the parents weren't prepared for it. The goalies weren't prepared for it. Coaches are mostly not prepared to support a goalie that is dealing with a significant mental health issue. So that is where, and myself included, I wasn't prepared to necessarily provide the right type of support or say the right things. And the last thing you want to do as a goalie coach or a parent is say the wrong things and push a goalie further down whatever troubles they're dealing with. So knowing that there was a limit on the type of advice or mentoring I could give for a goalie that was struggling with mental health, and knowing that, probably 90% of goalie coaches are in that same boat, there had to be a resource that basically bridged the gap between coaching and legit professional mental health support. And that's what Lift the Mask really is. It's not me or my organization preaching specific, mental health advocacy. It's literally like, we want to connect. If your goalie is struggling, or you're a parent and your goalie is struggling and you need legitimate help from legitimate professionals, we are going to help connect you to those people. So I think that's why the resource has been so well received, and why it's kind of taken over our nonprofit foundation, is because there's a legitimate need for it. And there's only so much you can say that you feel confident saying that is actually going to help a goalie. But because mental illness is invisible, and it doesn't affect just 1 in 5, it affects all of us. We are all somewhere on this mental health spectrum, and we move on that spectrum in different ways at different times for different reasons. We have to have some professional support ready to go at the click of a button. And that is what Lift the Mask provides. You go on the website, we've got consultants, we've got professionals, we've got advocates, we've got ambassadors. So all those different levels of the type of support that you need to get started on your mental health journey or to getting better is right there in one spot. And then we definitely do not want there to be financial barriers to the professional help. So if a kid reaches out, he or she is ready to see a professional and they don't want to tell their parents, or they don't have the money, we will provide that $100, donation to make sure that the financial side is not a barrier to these kids or the parents or the families to get the support that they need. So really born out of necessity more than anything. In terms of the future, I don't really honestly have a plan other than just help as many goalies as possible. Like, obviously I'd love to have a national partner, or I would love for the NHL to recognize it in some way and help with funding, because that's my goal, is to just bring in as much money as possible so that every kid that needs $100, I don't have to say, oh, well, actually I can only give you 50 today, or you might have to wait. I don't want there to be any financial barriers with our foundation either. So I'm constantly trying to find ways to just drum up support, so that I can keep dishing out stickers for free, or doing the free weekly, chats on Zoom and stuff. Like, that's where literally 100% of every dollar I raise goes right back into either, Lift the Mask or the scholarships or Goalie Guild stuff. In the 5 years I've been doing the Goalie Guild, I've never once taken a salary or a paycheck, because I know how valuable and how necessary this is. And so, yeah, it's really not trying to look too far ahead, other than just focus on what's directly in front of me. Kids are reaching out almost every day looking for help, and I'm just making sure I'm taking care of the kids as best as I can.
Yeah.
And then, the long-term stuff will take care of itself, and hopefully it just continues to grow and we can continue to help as many goalies as possible.
Have you seen greater interest in Lift the Mask since players like Robin Lehner became so vocal about his journey? Have you seen an uptick in interest because of players like that, and then other even lesser known players speaking up after that?
Absolutely. And it's so huge to have advocates in the goalie community like Robin Lehner and Ben Meisner, who's been really a great ambassador for us. Lots of other goalies as well. Recently we had the Bruins prospect Kyle Kaiser come on and just reach out of nowhere, just reached out and said, hey, I suffered with a really bad concussion this year, my, second year, third year pro. And those are so huge because to have the professionals reach out and advocate for mental health and open up about their struggles really proves how relatable it is to every single one of us. It doesn't matter if you're an elite athlete or you're a beer leaguer like us. Everyone, again, falls on the spectrum somewhere when it comes to mental health and illness. So just making it relatable and making it easier to have those conversations definitely has led to like an uptick in goalies reaching out looking for support, or parents understanding that their goalies might be silently struggling, because that's where the whole metaphor of lift the mask comes from.
Yep.
Like we wear a mask to protect us, but it can also hurt us emotionally because we hide behind that mask. We hide behind our daily emotions, what we show on the surface. And so Robin, I can't say enough good things about Robin Leonard and these goalies that have gone through these, obstacles, Corey Hirsch, Clint Malarchuk, like the list goes on and on. Like it just shows that, yeah, goalies are prone to mental health issues, not because there's something wrong with them, but because that's just the nature of life and the position. It comes with the territory, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with I'm 38 years old. I'm playing B-level beer league hockey. I get anxious before games. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Every time I go to the Avs game for an e-bug experience, I am anxious as hell. like sweaty palms, like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Like why? But that's just natural human tendencies, and there's nothing wrong with that. And knowing that there's nothing wrong with that really helps alleviate the anxiety, and it brings you closer together with everyone in the community, which is the ultimate goal, right? Is to just build a stronger community. And you reached out via email, sent you some stickers, and now we're having another conversation about it, and you're doing a podcast and you're reaching more people and helping us spread that message. So that's why I always go back to what Mitch Korn taught me: people matter more than pucks.
Absolutely. You had mentioned something, first of all, you said, when parents notice a sudden change in their goalie, but then you mentioned too, when a goalie gets a concussion. I don't recall really having anxiety when I was younger, but I've had a few concussions playing the game. Now I experience anxiety. I think that's one thing parents really have to watch their young goaltenders to pick up the signs of concussions. Now, I think youth sports in general, not just USA Hockey, but youth sports has done a better job of creating baselines before seasons so that if you suspect your child has a concussion, you can go find that. But if they have had a concussion, you have to understand what some of those long-term effects could be. And I know for me, it was anxiety. And I didn't put two and two together until I started listening to some of Dan Carcillo's talks about it. So, and, like you said, even talking to other goalies, a couple of weeks ago, one of the skates, it ended, and I just started talking to this other goalie, and he just kept talking. And, he's had an interesting, tough upbringing, and he said he wouldn't trade it for the world because it made him who he is, but he just kept talking. Everybody else left. We were the last two cars in the parking lot, and I got home, and in the morning I apologized to my wife, and I said, hey, I'm sorry I got home so late. This other goalie, we started talking, and he clearly wanted to keep talking. And 2.5 hours later, after the skating, she just said, well, clearly he needed somebody to talk to, and you listened. I went, okay. But and it was just one of those times where I just sensed he wanted to keep talking. So I let him. And, if it helped, I hope it did. I don't know if it did or didn't, but it's one of those times you pick up on those things eventually when you're more aware of it anyway.
Yeah. I think that's that act that you did, just being there to listen, even if you necessarily didn't want to be there, is exactly what we need to see more of in hockey and in the world in general. And that's just empathy, right? Like that's just empathy. That's just understanding that, a human being is looking for a connection in that moment in time, and you feel it, and you make the sacrifice, and you hang out, and you have a conversation. And I mean, the anxieties and the struggles in terms of our mental and emotional state as goaltenders manifests itself physically in many different ways. And you talked about, for you, it's anxiety. And for me, it's like just being able to shut my darn brain off. Like I deal with racing thoughts every day, and there's so many things going into my mind. It exhausts me.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like, it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm physically exhausted. I've been sitting in front of my computer for 10 hours. Everyone else in the world is going to sleep and normally able to just fall asleep. And like at 11 o'clock, all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, here we go. We're going on like hey brain, we're going to go on a 2-hour adventure thinking about esports and schools and any other thing that might be in my head at that time. And then I can't shut my brain off. And now it's 1:30 in the morning. You know what I mean? And so it manifests itself in all different ways. And I think that's important to realize too, is that there are a lot of stigmas associated with the goaltending position. You hear it all the time. Goalies are weird. And, oh, I never want my kid to be a goalie. The gear's too expensive. And that's what hurts me more than anything, because those stigmas, again, pigeonhole goalies to, you think a goalie is a certain way, which is not really true. Like, sure, maybe goalies are weird, and some goalies will like embrace that, and others it really hurts them. Like they don't want to be called weird because they feel ostracized. They feel like there's something wrong with them. And the same thing can hold true when a young goalie, has a bad game and their parents are yelling at them in the stands. And it's like, you can't do that as a parent, because just because they didn't have success on the ice doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. And you internalize all of it, and you start to think that there's actually like flaws within you. And so that's why I think Lift the Mask is important, because it's not just like, okay, here's a platform to, provide financial support for mental health. It's like also just having discussions like this where you can actually explain like why these stigmas are bad, and why it's bad to like yell at your kid, whether he or she is a goalie or any position, any sport. Don't yell at your kid when they're trying to have fun playing a sport, because they're going to internalize it like that means there's something wrong with them on the inside.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's just that basic understanding of like, again, empathy and social emotional support that is so desperately needed in the culture of competitive youth sports, because that is what's playing a role in the burnout and kids developing these social anxieties without anyone even recognizing it or knowing it.
Yep, absolutely. I'm looking at the time here. I've kept you for quite a bit, so I want to finish with the about 10 questions I have. It's more of a rapid fire. If you've seen Inside the Actors Studio, it's just kind of some questions and, whatever comes to your mind first. So the first one is the craziest coach moment you've had in your playing days, whether it be a coach going, throwing sticks on the ice a la Mike Keenan or what?
Craziest coaching experience was, this isn't like a proud moment, but actually having a coach show up completely obliterated from partying too hard the night before for a playoff game in high school, and didn't even like remember my name or anything about me. He was just so obliterated he couldn't even create the starting lineup. So I actually had to announce the starting lineup for the team because our coach was out of it. It was not a proud moment, but Texas hockey in the mid 90s, you got a little bit of everything. So that was a crazy coaching. And we're like freshmen in high school and we're just like, wow. So
that's funny. Favorite all-time goalie mask?
Favorite all-time goalie mask? I'm actually going to go with Felix Potvin's.
Okay.
I know that's a very typical answer, but that was just the blue and white and the flames and the whole cat setup. Yeah, Felix Potvin's.
I was just going to say which Potvin won, because I liked when he went to different teams. He did a little something to incorporate that team. The best one, I think, was LA when he had the little crowns on the side.
Nice, yeah, but definitely just like the Toronto Maple Leafs classic.
The original.
Potvin, 95-96 season. That was
Yeah, I didn't like him very much because I was a Blackhawks Eddie Belfour fan, and he had some great playoff series against the Hawks. Favorite rink you've played at?
Favorite rink I've played at? I mean, obviously, I've been really fortunate to skate on Pepsi Center ice. So Pepsi Center is pretty amazing. Obviously, there's just 16,000 black seats. But that was really cool experience skating at Pepsi Center.
Yeah, one thing I think a lot of people don't realize is when you play in those bigger buildings, how hot it is on the ice from those lights.
It's crazy. I say it every time. I always like shoot some kind of video for social media, and I'm just like, it is freaking hot out here. I don't know how NHL goalies do it with 16,000 people in the rink and even more lights on.
Yep.
And yeah, it's insane. I'm gassed every time I skate there.
When I was in high school, we played at what is now the All-State Arena, where the Chicago Wolves call home. And we split the game, and I was on the bench the first half of the game, and I was just sitting there, and I was already sweating, and I'm going,
It's
this
ridiculous.
is ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
The favorite stick you've ever used?
Oh, Sherwood 9950.
Okay, that's a good one. Mine is still the Cooper Reactor 5 Belfort pattern.
Yeah.
It was
Awesome.
just such a great old wood stick. What's your favorite youth hockey memory?
Favorite youth hockey memory would probably be my senior year of high school. I was voted like the team MVP and the league MVP. And that was a really exciting moment for me. There were so many better skaters and forwards that scored a lot of goals. But, you know, I had a really strong season as a senior, ranked one of the top goalies in Texas, and getting the league MVP and the league MVP and the school MVP was like probably my biggest on ice accomplishment, maybe besides being an e-bug.
Yeah. The worst post game beer you've ever had.
Oh,
And I can share what I talked
man.
to.
You know, I'm not a big drinker. I'm not a big beer guy, but there have been some. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I was talking to Dustin Smith from Nashville, and he said his worst one. He came up for a game in Minnesota in the winter, and they had post game beers, but what made this one bad was they were drinking them outside in the winter, and he was not prepared for that.
I've got a really funny story. It's not a post game beer, but I was playing drop in Denver, and I skate up to the bench to, you know, grab some water, and it's just that typical green Gatorade bottle on the bench, and I spray it all over my face, and it was beer. And I was pissed off because, you know, the stench of like warm beer. I mean, I guess it wasn't that warm, but it wasn't.
And then it's
like
in your
cold.
eyes.
Yeah, it's like in your mask, and it attaches to the foam, and you can't get rid of the smell. I was so pissed at that guy, but it was also hilarious, and everyone was laughing because it's just literally skate to the bench, spray it all over my face, try to drink something, and it's just beer. And I was just like, what is going on, guys? So that was a pretty funny moment.
There's a Coors commercial in there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The best chirp you've heard on the ice.
Oh man. Best chirp I've heard on the ice. I couldn't even give it to you right now, but I know it had something to do with my mom. Like I hear those, and those really stick. Those really grind my gears.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot. Again, back in Texas in the mid '90s, you heard a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And especially from parents in the stands too, because they treated it like a football game. So
Right.
I've heard a lot of good stuff. Nothing really comes to mind, but I'll have to think about that one.
When you tape your stick, heel to toe or toe to heel?
Always heel to toe.
I've only found one goalie that does it backwards, toe to heel. And
that's a good question, though. That's a good question. I actually go like, you know, well, I guess I can't really show you. I don't know if you play the video during the podcast.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, cool. So if you're looking at this stick, I actually start down near the base of the base of the paddle, and then go heel, and then go up the toe. So
yep. When I first started taping my stick, I started Hasek style, going up higher, and then I was like, that's a waste of tape. And then I went Belfort style with kind of that same area where it's just past that curve of the heel. And in part, I did that because I used Christian sticks for so long. And that heel would always get waterlogged and split. But if I taped it, it lasts a little bit longer. And there was a while in high school where I did the Trevor Kidd, the little piece of tape on the top and bottom of the paddle, just to make that last longer. Favorite number to wear?
30.
30. It's a good
Now, if you can tell me which goalie, why I choose 30, that's a bonus point for you.
Considering of when you started in Texas, I'm going to say Andy Moog had 30 at the time.
He did have 30 at the time, but and this is another story for another podcast, but it's actually Chris Osgood's number.
Okay.
Chris Osgood is the reason why the Goalie Guild is red and white and black, and he's the reason I got into goaltending, and he's like my unabashed idol.
I get the red and white because he played so much in Detroit. Why the black then? Because those are Chicago colors.
That's true. Black is just my favorite color.
Okay.
Black pads, black metal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the last question is advice for young goaltenders.
Oh, that's a good one. I have so much advice for goalies. My advice to a young goalie, I mean, the obvious one is never stop learning. But I will say, be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Be yourself. Do not try and be someone you're not. Don't adhere to what people tell you to do. Find your own path, find your own way, and be yourself and be creative.
That's great advice. Well, again, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I want to thank you for your time, Justin. For people that are looking for you, where can they find you on social media?
I'm not really active on the Twitter machine anymore, so Instagram is kind of my go-to for social stuff now. So Instagram at the Goalie Guild, pretty much anywhere at the Goalie Guild, you can find me. I try to make myself as accessible as possible. And that's it. Yeah. The Goalie Guild.
And I'll be putting links in the show notes for that, as well as to the website as well, the Goalie Guild and Lift the Mask. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
This is what I love. I love when it starts out as just like an email back and forth or an exchange on social, and it leads to, a conversation. And, next time I come up to Minnesota to see some of my buddies, I'll hit you up. Maybe we can share one of those post-game beers.
Post-game beers, or if it's wintertime, maybe we'll go skate on the pond.
There we go. See, I love that because I've only done that like 3 times in my life. So
I played in a tournament in January, and it was at the Groveland Park rinks, and they have 2 rinks set up, and then they have a little skating area and an oval going around all of this with the Zamboni. And it was pretty cool. Like the group I mentioned earlier, For the Love of Puck, they put it on. They're doing a documentary about just people who love hockey.
Nice.
But they put it on, and it was great. Me and one of the other goalies walked down the street in full gear to the one bar and went up to the bar and ordered some beers in full gear.
Yeah.
It was a fun weekend. But when you're in town, we'll have to get together. Yeah,
it's awesome. The 2 years I spent living in Minnesota was amazing. The high school state championship was like anything I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
All the rinks you can skate at. I could go to 6 different drop-ins in one afternoon in the Twin Cities. And it was an awesome 2 years. So big fan of Minnesota and the Twin Cities. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to meet soon. But thank you for having me on and allowing me to talk about, Lift the Mask and all these important components of the goaltending journey.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. What a great conversation that was with Justin. I think we could have kept talking for at least another hour if we had the chance. I need to thank him for being gracious with his time as well. Be sure to follow him on Instagram and Twitter at The Goalie Guild. I'll have links to his social accounts and websites, The Goalie Guild and Lift the Mask, in the show notes. You can always find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Simply search for Washed Up Goalie and I'll pop up. Visit washedupgoalie.com for some great hockey-related content, my beer league hockey video highlights, and all podcast episodes. I need to give a big thank you to the great hockey band The Zambonis for allowing me to use their music in my intro and closings to my episodes. Download their music on iTunes, listen to them on Amazon Music, or wherever you stream your music from. I'm working on lining up other goalies to talk to as well. I'm really excited about one who has said he'd like to come on the show after the Stanley Cup Finals conclude. If you are a goalie or have connections to a goalie who I should talk to, shoot me an email at washedupgoalie39@gmail.com or send me a DM on social media. Let's not forget, if you're a brand who wants to sponsor the show, be sure to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk and work something out. And finally, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment on the podcast platform you are listening on. It's a quick action on your part that helps others find Tendy Talk. Until next time, keep your stick on the ice and your body square to the puck.
You got picked last for every game. Nobody ever knew your name. You close your eyes and dream of change. And then one day on TV, you watched a game of hockey. You told your friends that will be me. And that's when your life changed. Your world was rearranged. Jumped off the bench and got right into the